And before we, even jump into InDesign, which I do want to just spend a couple minutes so that you guys can start to take some of your sketches this week and put those into InDesign. And this is a busy week, obviously, with the different elements that's going on. And one thing I would suggest too is with the branding portion of it, don't let that distract you from the project itself, which again is really focused on the layout, the composition that we're working with within the design. Coming up with a successful typeface that works to say the name of the restaurant, potentially mixing that with like we saw with a smaller typeface that might describe what it is a little bit further. It can be as simple as Italian restaurant or pizza and deli or whatever it may be, right? That's a good way to kind of tackle that. Something kind of large that acts as your main title for the restaurant. That's where you can get a little bit more decorative. That's where you can really infuse some personality into this project and into the overall menu. And then from there, again, rely on those more standardized typefaces to get you through the actual hierarchy here. Choose typefaces within Adobe fonts that have those different options within them, right? So again, I'll just hover over to Adobe fonts again real quick. All of the different fonts that you look at, they're all going to show you right there how many fonts are available within the different styles. Can you guys all see that okay? The Adobe fonts, you guys see that? Okay. Yeah, all of these are going to show you how many styles are available. So for example, here, I could see this one up here, this Sculpin. This is a nice typeface, right? It's a sans serif typeface. It's kind of a little bit more longer. It kind of works nicely for that title. And this has 10 different fonts inside of it, meaning the typeface of Sculpin has 10 variations inside of it. If I click inside of this, I know that there are different options. I have a light version, I have a light italic, a regular, a bold italic, a black and a black italic. This is great. This gives me some variation that I can use to increase the hierarchy within my menu without having to use an additional typeface. I could probably get away with an entire menu design just within the options available of these 10 typefaces, because there's a difference. The light is going to look much different than the bold, and the black italic is going to look much different than the medium, right? All of those can be used in variation with color and with size, so on and so forth. So choose those typefaces that have those options within them. If you are looking at a typeface, for example, that only has one font within it, I would not suggest using that for your actual typefaces for the menu. If you want to use this for your actual like logo for your word mark, that's fine, because once you set that up, you're not going to necessarily even need to use that typeface in the menu anymore. So for your word mark or for your logo, totally fine. You can pick anything you want because you're not going to need that variation. But within the typography that's going to be used in the menu, the actual titles of the dishes, the description, so on and so forth, make sure that you are choosing those typefaces with multiple options inside of them, okay? So that's going to be important and very, very helpful for you as you kind of get further into this assignment here. So let's do this. Let's jump over to InDesign and look at how we can kind of start to set this up, how we can work with these character and paragraph styles. We'll do a very simple introduction to this today. I really want to focus on the character, paragraph styles, and the tab options. That will enable us to at least start to format some of these things based on our sketches here. And I will go through, I realized there was that discrepancy there within the discussion and what it said on the assignment sheet. And I just want to make that clear that and I will update this as well, that there will need to be 5 sketches uploaded this weekend, those hand-drawn sketches for this. I know it said 3 inside there, that should be 5. I apologize for that. For our rough draft. So this should have these 4 elements here within our discussion this week. This is going to have step 1 through 4 here. You're going to have the logo, or excuse me, the letter mark or the logo that you've created. You're going to have that branding template filled out that will showcase the logo, the colors, and the typefaces that you're using. Then you're also in step 3 going to create those 5 thumbnail sketches that can be pencil on paper. If you'd like to go into the computer and use placeholder boxes like you saw in some of the previous examples, you can do that. But I think sometimes it's just as easy to get started on pencil and paper. So I would suggest probably going that route, thinking about your different design approaches, exploring the multiple layout, different directions and placement, as well as the size options available. Take into account the number of items in each category and reflect that in the actual finished layout. So if, for example, if you're dealing with appetizers and there's 3 items inside there, but your sketches shows 10 different placeholders for that, that's not going to align with the content that you're actually going to be placing inside there. So make sure you're looking at that and reflecting that within your sketches so that you can take those sketches and put them right into the computer without having to make those changes. And then lastly, begin your InDesign file based on the sketch that you've chosen and start to work with the appropriate text within the composition using the things that we're going to look at here today. If you want to bring in your actual photographic elements this week, you can do so as well. If you don't get a chance to do that this week, that's okay. We can always look at that a little bit further next week, potentially just using some sort of placeholder box or something for the time being would be fine. I really just want to make sure that you guys are getting started in InDesign this week and thinking about these different elements of the content. Okay. So we looked at the branding sheet there. I won't go too much further into that. Are there any questions on the actual branding template or sheet before we kind of move on there? Let's jump on. Okay, let's see anything coming through the chat. No, I have not yet, Chris, but I will here shortly. Thank you for reminding me. Appreciate it. Okay, well, let's do, Robert, can we put images on that? You mean the images that you're going to include on the menu, like include that within your branding template, or?
On the main logo.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can. Absolutely. Yep. If you wanted to put some other sort of elements inside of that and stuff, yeah, certainly you can. Yeah, that's the opportunity. That's like, really one space here of this project where you can kind of get a little bit more creative, a little bit, really tie in the overall theme of that restaurant. So yeah, certainly can. Right. So let's look at our InDesign here and what we're starting to do. So one thing you're going to want to take into consideration, and I actually pulled up a previous example, which I'll show, or I'll actually post to the module here as well. This is a previous students here with their branding page filled out. And I know most of these branding final marks have been shown in black and white. You can certainly apply the color to these inside these branding pages as well. I think that's just something that sort of gets overlooked sometimes, but you can certainly apply those. Going into your hand-drawn sketches, though, this is where we're going to get started with. We want to start to think about these different layouts. How do you want to utilize your layout? Remember, we're using 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, but it's up to you if you want that to be front and back on the portrait or vertical, or if you want it to be horizontal and you want to use the front and back, or if you want to use the actual bifold option as well, which would give you that different styling, right? So it's up to you, and think about that within your sketches. Use that opportunity. Think about how you want to place the actual hierarchy here, maybe putting things on the vertical, how you want to utilize the different spacing of the composition. In your sketches, I don't expect you to actually draw out all the typography, right? We can use these sort of placeholders and these lines here to show where the text is going to go. I would encourage you to try to think about the actual alignment and reflect that within your sketches as well. And then you can see here their final sort of design for their menu and how that's pulled from some of their sketches there too. So we're going to look at 2 different ways to set this up on InDesign. Then we're going to look at the character, paragraph styles, the tabs function, and then we're going to set you guys off so you can get started with this. Okay. So we have 4 main things to look at here. So First thing is you're going to want to decide what the format is going to be for your particular project. Here we can see that this one is starting to be built out as that bifold option, meaning we have that hard line in the middle where it's going to be folded. So of course you don't want any information to be in the center there where that fold is going to be. If you wanted to go with a more standardized, just flat 8.5 by 11, utilizing the front and the back, that's totally fine too. It's up to you. Thinking about that. In this particular case, again, we have the 8.5 by 11 page with 2 different columns set up here. Some of our information being brought into the space, and we're starting to format that hierarchy. But I'm going to go through the process here of setting this up on an actual flat piece. We'll do it a little bit differently. This time we'll do it on the horizontal, so we can just see how this can be done in different options here. So if you guys want to follow along with this, you can. Again, you don't have to use this same style, but it might help you to kind of just get set up with your own file. Of course, we're recording, so I'll post the recording here as well if you want to follow along. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come into InDesign here. And actually, before I do anything, let me reset my workspace. So we're all looking at the same thing. So I'm going to go to my workspace. I'm going to reset my Essentials workspace. I think we're pretty good to go there. And I'm actually going to create a new file now. So I'm going to come up to File, New, and Document. And this will create this new dialog box for me here, right? So one of the first things I'm going to want to do here is set my units so that I can see what I'm working with. So over here, my units, I'm going to set this to inches. And I can see that this is actually set up. Let me actually, I think some of this is already set up previous. So let me go back to the defaults here so that everybody's just looking at the same thing. Your guys' should probably look something like this here. Right. And in fact, if I go to print and go to letter, that will give me a sort of default that we can all go off of here. So I'll do that. I'll go to print, I'll go to letter, and I'm going to go back to units here and set this to my inches. Now I know that I'm dealing with 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper here. This is where I can decide what I want my orientation to be, if I want that to be vertical like this, or if I want it to be horizontal. It's up to you. Just for the sake of it, let's go with horizontal here and just kind of see how that might work. I'm still using it 8.5 by 11. I want to create 2 pages for this because I want there to be a front and a back for this. And right next to my pages, again, I have the option to toggle on and off of these facing pages, right? Now, in this particular case, I'm not setting these up as spreads like a magazine. So I do not want these to be set up as facing pages. I want these to come in as singular pages because essentially it's just going to be a front and a back. They're not going to be facing each other like a magazine. So I'm going to toggle that off so that I no longer have facing pages, still leaving that with 2. And then I can come into my actual space here and start to set up what I want my columns and my margins and my bleeds to look like. So the amount of columns you have is going to depend on what the layout looks like, right? If you're dealing with the vertical or certainly with the bifold, you're probably going to be dealing with 2 columns. If you're dealing with the more horizontal, potentially anywhere from 3 to 6 to 8, whatever that may be. Whoops, I saw a comment coming through here. Is there an issue with the Wi-Fi or something, guys? Is it going in and out for you guys? Okay. Christina, noticed your comment here. I guess I didn't feel like it was doing anything on my side. Maybe it was a bit of a lag on your recording there. Let me know if that persists there for you, Christine. So again, looking at my actual margins here, sorry, my columns. I'm going to set this particular one up to 3 different columns. Again, so I can kind of see these 3 columns because I'm using that on my horizontal. If you wanted to span that over to 4, you could certainly do that as well. But for this case, I'm going to go ahead and stick with 3 and maybe bump that up a little bit with my column gutter size there. So I'm going to do 3 columns at 0.25. Now for my margins, if I wanted to adjust my margins, making those bigger or thinner potentially, I can always do that by clicking up and down on these. And that's going to change all of these at the same time. You'll notice when I change my top margin, it changes all of my margins to reflect that same change, right? In this particular case, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to unlink all of these margins so that I can set them at different heights. And the one that I'm going to do a little bit different is I'm going to do my top margin at 1 inch here, just to kind of create a space up at the top of my menu where I could potentially put a title, maybe some other information regarding the actual restaurant. I'm not really sure. I mean, you guys are gonna have some sketches to go off of. I'm just kind of setting this up. But I do want to set this up with some varying margins, which can be interesting to do, right? So just because you're using these margins doesn't mean they all need to be universal. And if you break those, you can set these as different dimensions. So I have a 1 inch margin at the top. The rest of my margins on the outside are 0.375. Now down here is my bleed and my slug. And this is something we haven't really looked at too much. And part of that is we're not printing these out. We're looking at all of these digitally. So these don't really apply when we're working digitally. And what a bleed is essentially it's going to give you marks on the outside of your page so that any content that would actually bleed outside of your composition is actually going out a little further than the page itself. So in this particular case, since we're setting this up as a print file, we do want to give this a bleed here. Whether or not we have information going out, we want to set this up with a bleed. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to a 0.125 bleed. And you'll notice that again, that's going to set my top, bottom, left, and right all to that same bleed. I could set those differently if I needed to, but there's not very often that you're trying to do that. And what you'll notice is when I did that, it created this red line on the outside. And this is going to be my bleed line, meaning if there's any information that is intended to bleed off of my page, like a photo, for example, that photo should extend all the way out to that bleed line. So that if when you're printing and when you're cutting this for whatever reason, none of that gets cut off, basically, right? That photo would go all the way outside of that design. So if there's any shifting that occurs, or if something got cut a little shorter or something, there wouldn't be some sort of white line there. So anytime you're going to have elements go outside of your composition, you want there to be a bleed setting, and you want those elements to go all the way out to that bleed line. And a good standard for that is 0.125, okay? The slug is kind of similar to that in the sense if you have universal colors that are going out, we're not going to really worry about that too much. The biggest thing we want to concern ourselves with right now is our actual bleed, okay? So now we have this pretty well set up. I could go ahead and title this up here, menu test. And I have this pretty much ready to go. So you don't have to set yours up like this, of course, it will all depend, but this is one way that we could go about it, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and click create here. And now I have this sort of format set up for me here. I can see that I have 2 pages. Each one of these pages has these 3 columns inside of here. I have a clear margin from the outside, where some space to put at the top where my logo is potentially going to go, so on and so forth. Maybe the hours of operation, some graphic elements or imagery or something like that. I also have my bleed line so that if I have things go all the way out, I want to make sure to bring those images or text or graphic elements, whatever they are, all the way out to those red lines, not just the outside of my white page. And now I can start to come in and start to format some of my text within here, right? So the first thing I want to do is create some text boxes and start to bring in some of this information. So I'm going to come over here to my type tool, and I'm actually going to click up in the top left-hand corner of my first column. Get in there. There we go. And I'm going to click all the way down to the bottom right. And it doesn't look like I'm perfectly on the line here. And I can tell that because if I go back to my selection tool, I can see that my box is just slightly wide, right? I want that to actually be 3.25. So I'm gonna go ahead and set that and just adjust that. And that's really important because once we set this up, we're gonna utilize this for all of them. So I wanna make sure that that's perfectly centered in there, right? I can actually see if I zoom in, it's still, oops, it's still slightly off. Sorry guys. Let's get right on there. There we go. See, I'm perfectly on that grid now. I have that text box perfectly there. And I'm going to do something here. I'm just going to do a test 1 to show you guys some text inside of there. So I've created one text box. I just put some text inside there just to show you something real quick. And now with this single text box, I want to create 2 more. And I want to actually link these together. So I can create new text boxes if I wanted to, or I can simply select the one that I have, go to edit, copy, edit, paste in place, and simply move this one over to the right to align with my grid, right? So I've copied that, I pasted it right in front, and I just slid it right over. I'll do the same thing for my last one here. I'm going to go to edit, copy, edit, paste in place, and slide that over to the right. Now I just have 3 text boxes here, all the same size, all fitting perfectly within my columns, which is what I want. Now, if I wanted to link these for any reason, what you can do is I can come down here to the very bottom of my text box, and you'll notice that there's this little square box, right? And if I click on this little square box, this is going to allow me to link this to these other text boxes that I have. So by clicking on that square box, you'll notice that my mouse got loaded up with this other text in this from the previous box here. And if I come up here, click on my second column of text, it will go ahead and link those together. Notice how that text got brought over to that first box. Same thing with the second to the third, is I'm going to click on this one, bring it up to my third, and link that together. Now, what does this do? Well, this now means that any text, and I'll actually fill this with some placeholder text so you can see. If I right click in there and go to fill with placeholder text, this is just random text to fill out the space. Any changes I make in one text box is going to be shown in the additional text boxes here as well. If I make any hard returns inside here, it's going to go ahead and span that, because essentially it's linking all of these. It's going from this box up to this box here, and then back over to my third box here. So any changes I make inside here will be reflected across these as a whole. And that's really nice, because that way, when you are creating some sort of larger formatting, you don't have to necessarily go back and make changes throughout the whole document. You're just going to make a change in one space and it will affect it throughout. So you guys still with me so far? Created a couple text boxes here, got them in our columns, linked these bad boys together. Awesome. All right, let's take this a little bit further here. We can leave this with our placeholder text if we wanted to for now, and start working with that to figure out some of our character and paragraph styles. To be completely honest, I almost think it's easier just to start grabbing some of the text that's actually appropriate for this and then start to format it using that. But it's up to you at this point. With this week, if you want to just use the placeholder text, totally fine. I'm actually going to come on over to the actual text that's provided here. I'm going to use the Italian restaurant. I'm going to just go to, see if I can select it all. Edit, select all. I'm working in text edit here. This should open up in any word processing program you need to. I'm going to select all that. I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to go to copy. So I selected all the text from that menu. That's very, very important. I'm going to come back over here, and I'm actually going to select into this as well and select all of my text, that placeholder, erase it, and I'll put in the one that I just copied from my actual deal there. So this is the actual text that we're going to need for the assignment, right? If you choose to go with the Italian version. Now, this is very similar to how this would be sent to you as a designer, right? Let's say you're working on this in a real life scenario and you're working on a menu for a client, and they're like, hey, we need this new design for the menu. It needs to be on 8.5 by 11 because we want to be able to print it in-house. We're going to either do bifold or what have you, right? You're like, got it, cool, yeah. I'll work on a couple things. One of the things that you're going to need is the content for the menu. You're not expected to come up with that. You don't know what these dishes are and stuff, right? So they're going to send that over to you. More than likely, they're going to send that over in like a Word document or an email, right? It's just going to be listed out. It's going to say, hey, this is the actual appetizer here. This is the name of the plate. This is what goes into the plate. And this is the price of the plate. There is no hierarchy necessarily that's going on in this text right now. It's all set at the same size. I mean, the only sort of hierarchy that's going on are these line breaks that's happening that lets us know the differences between the different plates, right? That's the only way we can kind of decipher this. But it's our job as designers to go in and start to apply these styles to these different areas that we're working with, and working with the formatting as well. So just taking into account what we have here so far, we're going to go in now to start looking at the typefaces that you've chosen and how you can start to implement that for this assignment. All right. Let me bring up my notes here real quick. There was a couple steps I wanted to review. Okay. Right. I'm glad I did that. So I'm looking at my space here, my working space. I know that I have my properties panel, right, which is going to give me information about whatever I have selected at that time. If I'm working with text and I select some text, that properties panel is going to change to reflect what the changes I'm making with that text. It's going to tell me the character that's being used here, the paragraph and the alignment that's going on. And it's actually going to bring up my paragraph styles right up here at the top as well with my character styles too. So all that information is going to change depending on what it is that you're selecting on. Now, one of the things that I would do before you get too far underway with this project is I would bring up your hidden characters. And what that means is if you go up to type in InDesign, you'll notice that at the very, very bottom of that, it's going to say show hidden characters. And if I click on that, it's going to show me all of these text editing characters that are hidden from anybody, who would not have InDesign. But when we are using text formatting, we want to see these things because these are going to help us in our actual text formatting. The main ones that you need to know is this sort of dot here in between, which is going to be any sort of space. So if there's additional spaces, you'll see that there's additional dots there. Typically, you only want one dot in between each word. In fact, I did look, there's actually a typo here where it has two. So that would be something that you'd want to go through and correct as you were type formatting for this project, right? The next thing we want to look at is our paragraphs and how these are broken up. And this becomes more important when we're dealing with our paragraph and character styles. And the reason being is there's two ways to use a return in InDesign. I think we've talked about this before, but I want to review this a little bit further. There's two returns that you can do. And essentially, when we're talking about returns, we're talking about making a new paragraph, right? Hitting the enter bar on your keyboard, just like you would in any other word processor. Usually, when we're making a new paragraph, we hit that return button, right? The enter button on that keyboard. That's going to create a new paragraph for you. It's going to bring that line of text down. Now, in design, in text formatting, that's called a hard return, meaning you're creating a new paragraph and it's letting me know. This little icon here is letting me know, hey, this is a new paragraph. That little paragraph icon is letting me know. Now, the other option within your returns is what we call a soft return, which is when you hold the shift key and the enter or return key. And it does the very similar thing. It's still bringing that line of text down to the next line. I'll do it again so you can see, but it's a different icon here, right? It's now a little sort of L that's kind of on its side, if you will. And what that's letting the program know is that you are not necessarily creating a new paragraph here, a whole new thought. You're simply trying to bring this line of text down. So you're not necessarily creating a new paragraph. You're just trying to get that line of text to come down. And why would that necessarily be important? Well, sometimes when we are working with these character styles and paragraph styles, we want to apply things to the entire paragraph. Other times we want to apply them only to certain lines of text, okay? So it's important to understand the difference between a hard return and a soft return. And again, we'll look at that a little bit further as we get into these paragraph styles. But when we're creating a new paragraph, we want to use normally like we do the enter the return key. When we just want to bring that line of text down, we're going to use that soft return, that shift return within the space. Okay. And we'll look at the reasoning behind that a little bit further here. But first, let's go ahead and set this text to some different styling here that we're going to do. So the first thing we want to do is we want to set these up and develop some headers and some different sort of subheaders and body copy that's going to happen here as well. So the first thing I want to do is to open up my paragraph styles. So if I come over here to my window, I am going to come into styles and all the way over to paragraph styles. And this is going to open up a new dialog box for me here, which is going to toggle between paragraph styles and character styles, actually. Okay. Right now, there's nothing inside of these. They're just set to none for character and basic paragraph for paragraph. But we're going to add some paragraph styles. And basically, what these are going to be is these are going to be set standard of a type size, a type style, so on and so forth. And once we create this once, we can apply it to all of the different headers within our design. So let's take a look at what that means. First thing we're going to do here is select one of our headers, which is going to be one of our sort of sections of our menu, right? Our appetizers here. And we're going to give this some attributes here for this particular style. So I'm going to go over to my paragraph styles and I'm going to click on this little plus icon at the very bottom of my window. And that's going to bring up this paragraph style 1. Now you'll notice I have this selected up here, the antipasta. And when I clicked on the plus, it brought up this paragraph style 1. Now, if I double click on this paragraph style 1, it's going to bring up my paragraph style options for me. And this is where I can set this to be whatever I want it to be. So for example, if I want my basic character, coming down to my basic character formats, if I want to set this to, I'm going to use the example of a Clarendon typeface or super Clarendon in this case. And I'm going to set this to bold. So there's kind of bold option. I'll set my size here to 15 and my leading to maybe 19. And I'm going to go ahead and leave this the way that it is with my kerning and my tracking, my case, so on and so forth. You know, if you wanted to go with all capitals or something like that, you certainly could here as well, or small caps even, which gives you those large uppercase, but still using small capitals. I'm going to go ahead and just keep it to my normal, and I'm going to go ahead and click OK here. Okay. And actually, sorry, I'm going to click into that one more time and change the name of this. Instead of that paragraph style 1, I'm going to change this to header. Now we'll change that over here. So what that does is it creates this paragraph style that I can now go through my menu to any of these elements that are going to become headers, like this one over here. Let me get rid of some of these returns. The salad section, right? I can now select that whole area there and simply click on the header, and it's going to give me the same attributes for all of those. Now, there's a few portions of this menu, right? And you're thinking, well, sure. I mean, yeah, you know, you did all that, but I could probably easily just go back in and change that to 15.19 and so on and so forth. And you could, you absolutely could, right? But imagine if this was a 100-page document, and imagine if you had to do this, you know, literally 1,000 times, then that workflow would not make any sense whatsoever. So you want to be able to create these paragraph styles so that you can set this up not only for you, but for other people working on this in the future as well. If you have this set up organized with multiple paragraph styles and character styles, you can go through and highlight any sort of area and apply that paragraph style to that specific portion, right? So I'm just going to go through here and do this to my other areas as well, my pastas. And I actually don't even need to select the whole thing. I'm just going to click right into the pastas, click on my header. I'm going to come over to my beef section, click on my header, my poultry, click on my header. And that's good for right now. This is letting me know that I actually have some text that's running outside of this text box down here because I can see this red square. So there is some text that we're not seeing, but we're going to get to that as we start to format this a little bit further. So we might need to do that one more time here, but we'll see where we're at. And actually, I think that was just it. I just had some spaces inside there, so we're good. So that was creating one paragraph style, one header paragraph style that I was able to apply to all the different sections here, right? So let's go through and do that again for another section here as well. Let's go through and do it for our subheaders as well. So now I'm going to go ahead and come up to one of my subheaders, which is essentially the title of my dish. And I'm going to do the same thing. Right now I'm set to basic paragraph form. I'm going to go ahead and click on the create new paragraph style. Go into this new paragraph style that I've created by double clicking into it. I'll title this as my subheader. And again, coming over to my basic character formats. This time I'm going to do a different typeface. I'm going to do Avenir. And I'm going to set this as Avenir Black, which is going to be my kind of heavier option of Avenir. I'll set this as 11 point size with a leading of 17. And maybe I want to make this one all capitals here. See what that's going to look like. Okay. I'm actually going to bring this down. We'll leave it at 11 right now, and we'll see what we look like here. So I got that one set up. I could even do something over here where if you went, there's other options that you can play with within the space here as well. General, basic, you can get into some of the actual options here a little bit further. One thing that you might want to look at, is the character color here. If you did want to apply this to any sort of colors to any of these, this would be a place where you could certainly do that. You could think about what those might be. So if I brought down the black a little bit, just kind of giving this a little bluish tint, it's going to kind of give it that color attribute as well. I'll go ahead and hit OK. And now that should give me, whoops, I don't think I was in my subheader there when I changed the color. No big deal. But you can see how that still applied that. So now I have my subheader here as well. And I'm going to do one more for my actual body copy, and then we'll go through and do this to everything here. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of my body copy, create one more paragraph style, double click into this. This time I'm going to title this body. I'm going to use the same Avenir typeface, but a lighter version of that. Let's see, maybe for this one, I'll use the light. I'm going to use a 10-point type, so it's a little bit smaller at a 12-point leading. Case is normal. All that is going to stay the same. I could even just bring down the tint of this potentially. Let's just set this to 70. And I'll go ahead and hit OK. So I have some styles that I've started to apply throughout this now, right? And again, the beauty of this is that with my text, I can simply, or with my type tool, now that I have these paragraph styles set up, I can simply click on the actual anywhere within that paragraph and go ahead and select the subheader, and then click anywhere within the next paragraph below it and click on my body, and it will start to apply those. And the reason that I don't need to actually highlight the entire copy there is because what it's looking for in this text is these hard returns. Anywhere where there is that paragraph break, it's letting the computer know, hey, that's a new paragraph. So that style is only going to go up from the past paragraph to the new paragraph, right? That's why we are using those hard returns. Let's look right here. If I were to actually change this from a hard return to a soft return, right? So instead of using that hard return, I'm using that soft return. Now, if I click into my description and I go to, my subheader there, it's trying to change that. It's trying to give me those attributes of the actual subheader there as well. So it's confusing that because it's saying, oh, is this a full paragraph or are you just trying to bring this line of text down? So anytime you're trying to change that paragraph style, you want to make sure that there is a hard return in there. If you're not, then you can use those soft returns. And because of that, we can simply just place the cursor into any of those areas and start to apply those different headers and subheaders throughout the overall piece, right? And honestly, what I might actually do is something like this, is go ahead and select all of this, go to my select my body copy, and then go back through and just select the ones that actually need the headers and subheaders a little bit. However you want to do it, it's really up to you. Okay, just kind of an opposite way of doing it here. Does that make sense to anybody? Anybody have any questions on setting those paragraph styles up? Simply applying these. You can see me just moving through the space here and applying these subheaders to all of the different subheaders. Now that all of the body copy is already set to that body copy that I've applied. Kind of just do this quickly so we can finish that up. Now, once I get through with some of this, I will still need some text formatting that I'll have to go through and look for hyphens, potentially make some changes. But this will give me a good starting point to be able to go through and change this, okay? All right, last two here. All right. So I have my different sections, I have my titling done, so on and so forth, which is looking good. It's looking good. I obviously, like I said, I still have some text formatting I need to do. I can see that there's some extra paragraphs inside some of these spaces here, right? Because of those hidden characters, and some weird hyphens and things like that, things that are getting knocked down to 2 lines, so on and so forth. So this is where you want to start making some decisions and some text formatting decisions once you have some of this content in place as well. We're going to look at this a little bit further next week too. Really this week, if you can get to a place like this where you have all of your content in here and you've worked with your paragraph styles and the character styles, then you'll be in a good place to start moving forward. But I do want to introduce just the difference of these character and paragraph styles when they're used. And lastly, just look at tabs here as well. So the other addition that we have here is, oh, you know what? Sorry, before I do that, another beauty to these paragraph styles is we can make universal changes to this, right? For example, for my subheaders, if I realize, you know what, I really don't want these to all be in all capital letter forms, or I want them to be a little smaller or a lighter version of that font or something. Once I have these paragraph styles set up, I can double click into that subheader options again, the one that I want to change, go back to my basic character format, and any changes that I make over here, if I go back to normal, it's going to make that across the board, right? So again, saving you tons of time when you're working with a lot of different content within your menu. I can change the sizing on the fly here. It's going to change that universally. I can change the different weight, or maybe I want it to be oblique in one of these, heavy oblique, black oblique, whatever that is. In fact, I think we'll keep it at that. That is the beauty of these paragraph styles, is once you make this up, you can see how it would save you tons of time to be able to go through and universally make those changes, right? I do want to look at the character styles and the tabs. Are there any questions right now on the paragraph styles, how to set those up and or apply those to the different sections of the text? Okay. The link that I provided in the module goes over these as well, but I wanted to review these. So character styles, what's the difference? What's the difference between a character style and a paragraph style? Well, let's look at our price here, for example, right? Right now, the price is at the end of the paragraph for the description of this plate, right? Well, let's say that I wanted to bring that up to the top here where my title of my dish is instead of being at the bottom. Just because the text was given to me that way doesn't mean I need to keep it that way. So potentially you could bring your price up to sit along the same baseline as the description of your plate. But if I wanted to show this in a different way, it's going to be impossible for me to do that because it's already set to this subheader paragraph style here, right? And I don't have new paragraph breaks in here or hard returns, but I can set these to a new paragraph style within here as well. So this is going to be where I want to use a character style, because I want to change the character of just particular, or I want to change particular characters within a larger paragraph that I am using. So the paragraph style applies to the entire paragraph. Character styles apply to single characters within that paragraph. For instance, the price that we have here. So with that being selected, with the number 8 being selected, toggling over to my character styles instead of paragraph styles, we're going to create a new style here. Go double click into my character style. I'm going to title this price, because that's what I'm going to apply these to, is the price on the menu. And I'm going to come into my basic character formats. And here I'm going to change this to something different. Let's use the Avenir again. Or, we could even use the Clarendon if we wanted to potentially change that up as well. We could see how that was good, how that might potentially look. If we wanted to use that, we could use it as the regular or maybe the italic version of that to kind of keep consistency, maybe the bold italic. So that is giving me my, and actually I think I'll just go with bold. Let's go with black so it looks very different. So it's giving me a different character style within that overall space. I could, of course, adjust the size of this slightly if I wanted to as well, making it a little bit larger there so that it stands out a little bit more. And I'll go ahead and hit, actually, let's do one more thing. Let's do the character color. Let's change this to a new color here as well. Maybe we'll use, and of course, ideally I'd be referencing my actual branding template for this, but I'm just kind of pulling this together for right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and change the character color there to that new assigned color and hit OK. So now we have this new character style here that's placed within this different paragraph and allows you to change the look and the feel of that within the different paragraph. Now, of course, I need to come through and do some editing, copy over my 750, bring that up to this line, paste that, then select the character style and apply that price to it, right? So there's a little bit of editing that's involved there as well. But you can see how that is much easier to do there. So I won't do that for all of these, but you can see how the difference there between the character styles and the paragraph styles, when those are to be applied. Paragraph styles are going to be applied within the entire paragraph itself. Character styles are going to be applied within the actual paragraph, right? So you're going to just change the specific styling of that within the actual paragraph itself. And of course, again, you'd want to go through and change those edits. So those are the difference. Paragraph styles, character styles. I do want you guys to be using these within your menu. You don't need to have a ton of them. Again, for your paragraph styles, right now I have my my header, my subheader, and my body copy, right? I have, and then I have in my character styles, my price, which is there as well. You don't need to have a ton of them, but having a few of these will allow for that to separate those within the space, right? You can utilize those much easier and apply those. The last thing I want to just look at is the tabs here. So let's say we wanted to bring this price all the way out here to the end, right? Instead of using some sort of spaces or something like that to do so, we can use our tab features within here. And tabs are very similar to how we work within any other word processing application. If we go over to type and we pull down our tabs window, it's going to kind of position this within your text box here. So notice how it aligns it right at the top of my text box, and it's actually measuring this out. I know my text box is 3.25, and that's what it's showing me here. If this ever moves for whatever reason, you can always realign that by using the magnet here. So once you hit that magnet, it will realign towards that text box. And if you wanted to kick this over and create some sort of tab for this, you can simply click into the actual tab, click into the actual tab, drag that out. And as soon as you hit the tab button there, it will go ahead and change the position of where you want that to be, right? kind of giving me a weird thing here. I can make this come all the way out to kind of set the edge of my text box. Whoops, too far there. So I'm essentially just creating a tab, bringing that arrow all the way out to the edge of my text box. I could even set this specifically to 3.25. So that's going to sit right at the edge. And with that, I should be able to set all of these at that as well. You know, we could set all of these, select all of these, go to any sort of right-hand align tabs. You can click on that right-hand align at 3.25. Oops, not 2.25, sorry, 3.25. And coming into these different options now, I can hit that tab and it will perfectly right align those over to the other side. If I wanted to continue doing this with these new ones, I'd select that number 6, come down here, paste it, oops, paste it. Tab that over and then apply my character style to that price. Does that make sense to everybody? So those tabs can be adjusted if you need to. And once you set those, you can continue to hit that tab and it will go ahead and bring it over to wherever you positioned it. If I wanted to change that tab and bring it in to only 3 inches instead of the 3.5, I could do that as well. Whoops, I was only selected on that single numeral there. Get off of that. If I wanted to bring that in, I could simply do that, right? You guys get the idea. I'm not able to select on that right at the moment. There we go. You see how I bring it all in to make those universal changes. That's really what we're looking to do here. We're working to sort of find, not only set up this document and work with the hierarchy and things like that is working, but we're also looking to set this file up appropriately so that, again, if you were to have somebody else work on this or pass this over to somebody, this would be able to be continued upon, right? You would be able to go in, if you wanted to change the pricing, character formats or something like that, you can do that on the fly here, you know, universally. It's going to make for a much quicker workflow. Once you start getting in the flow of things, it will start to, you know, create that consistency within all the different elements. And that's the other beauty of this, is it creates that consistency within all of the different spacing that's happening here.